What if a little girl who'd never sung outside her bedroom was suddenly pulled on stage with a retired music legend in front of the whole town? What happened next didn't just change her life. It awakened something long buried in everyone around her. But to understand how it all began, you'll have to listen closely, because sometimes the quietest voices carry the most powerful echoes. Before we begin, if you love heartfelt healing stories that celebrate kindness, family, and second chances, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It means the world to us and helps these stories reach those who need them most. Now, let's begin. Single dad's daughter was pulled on stage with a retired singer. Her voice froze the audience in awe. The rain had been falling since noon, an insistent, steady curtain that blurred the narrow two-lane road winding through the outskirts of Millersville. Jack Murrow's windshield wipers creaked in tired rhythm as his beat-up Ford truck sputtered over a hill, headlights flickering in the silver downpour. "Come on, don't die on me now," he muttered, coaxing the steering wheel like it could hear him. Ellie was waiting, always in the same spot by the flagpole after school, her backpack hugging both shoulders, her chin tucked low to avoid attention. She hated being the last one picked up, said it made her feel like the forgotten package. Jack never forgot her, not once in 12 years. But the old truck had other ideas. A sputter, a lurch, then silence. Great Jack exhaled, easing the truck to the shoulder. No signal, no umbrella, just his toolbox and a wrench that had seen better days. He popped the hood and jumped out into the rain. The engine hissed like it was laughing at him. He leaned in, hands already blackened from grease and grit, scanning the damage. That's when he heard it, a sharp cry, more of a yelp coming from down the embankment. Jack looked up, squinting through the rain. Off to the right, near a bent wooden fence, someone was huddled on the ground. A figure in a cream-colored coat soaked through, struggling to rise. Without a second thought, Jack jogged over, boots splashing in mud. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" The woman looked up. Her silver hair clung to her face, streaked with rain. She was older, maybe late 60s, maybe more, but held a kind of elegance that defied the storm. She gripped her ankle, wincing. "I slipped," she said with a grimace, brushing wet hair from her eyes. "The ground's treacherous." Jack knelt beside her. "Don't move. Let me check that." Her ankle was swelling fast. "You might have sprained it," he said. "I've got a truck just up the road. I can take you home or to urgent care, whichever's closer." She hesitated, eyes scanning his oil-stained jacket and calloused hands as if weighing risk. Then she nodded. "I live not far from here, corner of Maple and Bell. The Green Victorian." Jack blinked. The Green Victorian was a local legend. People called it the Silent House. No one had seen the owner in years. "All right," he said, gently helping her up. "Let's get you out of the rain." 20 minutes later, Jack was wiping his boots on the doormat of the house he'd only ever seen from a distance. It loomed beautiful and neglected, ivy crawling up one side like it owned the place. Inside, the air smelled like old books and bergamot. Classical music drifted faintly from an unseen radio. He guided her to a cushioned armchair near the fireplace, which sparked to life with the flick of her hand. "Thank you," she said, exhaling as she settled in. "You didn't have to stop." "Wasn't gonna leave you lying in a ditch," Jack replied. "I'm Jack, by the way." Jack Murrow. A flicker of recognition crossed her face. Then with the softest smile, she said, "Margaret." "Maggie Sandoval." The name stirred something. Jack straightened. "Wait, the Maggie Sandoval. My mom had one of your records when I was a kid. You just vanished one day." Maggie smiled faintly, eyes gazing toward a framed photo on the mantel, her younger self, microphone in hand, frozen mid-note. "Life takes you places," she said, "sometimes away from the spotlight." Jack nodded, still a little stunned. "You were incredible." Voice like a velvet storm. Her eyes softened. "Thank you." A silence settled between them, not awkward but curious, like two melodies finding their key. "I can fix that ankle brace for you," he said after a beat. "And maybe take a look at your kitchen sink. It's leaking a bit, I think." She blinked, then laughed. "You caught that, did you?" "Hard to miss," Jack replied, already rolling up his sleeves. By the time he finished tightening the loose pipes beneath the sink and adjusted a broken cabinet hinge, the storm had eased. The clock on her wall chimed 4. Jack's heart sank. Ellie. He cursed under his breath, wiping his hands on a rag. My daughter. I was supposed to pick her up after school. She's probably pacing by the flagpole thinking I left her. Let me drive you, Maggie said suddenly. With a sprained ankle, I have a chauffeur, she replied simply. Of course she did. Outside, a black Lincoln idled in the circular driveway. The driver barely blinked when Jack climbed in beside Maggie. As they pulled away, Maggie glanced sideways. Your daughter, does she like music? Jack smiled. She sings when she thinks no one's listening. She's got a voice, honest and raw, but she's shy, real shy. Maggie tilted her head. Maybe it's time someone heard her. He looked at her puzzled. She only smiled. When they pulled into the school parking lot, Ellie was there sitting on the curb, hugging her knee's raincoat over her head. Jack jumped out, running to her. I'm so sorry, baby. I thought you weren't coming, she whispered, her voice tight. I'd never do that, he said, crouching down to meet her eyes. Something happened. I'll explain. Ellie looked past him, then at the Lincoln, at the elegant woman in the back seat, who lifted a hand and waved. Who's that? Jack grinned. Someone who used to change the world with her voice. And maybe he paused, brushing a raindrop from Ellie's cheek. She's about to do it again. The sky cleared by evening, leaving behind the soft golden hue of late autumn. From the kitchen window of their modest duplex, Jack watched Ellie sit on the back porch steps, her hoodie up, sketching quietly in a lined notebook. He could tell she was still unsettled, her shoulders drawn in one sneaker, tapping the concrete rhythmically, like a metronome of anxious thought. Inside, a kettle whistled. Jack poured hot water over 2 bags of chamomile, added honey to hers, the way she liked, 3 drops no more, and walked outside, offering her the mug. She took it without looking up. Thanks. Jack sat beside her, letting the silence breathe. You mad? He asked gently. No. He waited. Just embarrassed. What for? Ellie shrugged. The fancy car. The old lady waving at me. I think she's famous, isn't she? Jack chuckled. She was. A long time ago. Ellie finally glanced up. Who is she? Maggie Sandoval. Ellie's brows lifted. The singer. He nodded. I met her by accident. She fell near the fence past Maple Hill, twisted her ankle. I gave her a ride home. Ellie sipped her tea slowly, thoughtful. Is she nice? Jack smiled. She's got eyes like someone who's seen everything but still chooses to be kind. That's rare. Ellie nodded, then grew quiet again. Jack studied her. She asked about you, you know. Ellie froze. What said? Maybe it's time someone heard you sing. Ellie turned crimson. Dad, no. No way. She didn't mean on stage or anything. Just heard you. That's all. But you promised, she said, a sudden edge to her voice. You said my singing's just for us. Jack inhaled slowly. And I meant it. I'd never push you, baby. He paused, looking at her. I want you to know you have something special. Ellie pulled her hood lower. That's what Mom used to say. Jack blinked. It wasn't often Ellie brought her up. The words landed between them like a fragile glass bell. I remember her singing to me, Ellie said, her voice quiet. When I was little, I thought the stars came out because of her voice. Jack smiled through the sudden sting behind his eyes. She'd have said the same about yours. That night, while Ellie slept, Jack stayed up scrolling through old YouTube clips of Maggie Sandoval. In her 20s, her voice had the effortless power of ocean waves, sweeping then tender. The comments under the videos told the same story. She disappeared too soon. Her music raised me. Where did she go? Jack leaned back, arms crossed. He wasn't the star chaser type, never had been. But there was something about Maggie more than the voice, more than the name, something unfinished. He glanced down the hall where Ellie's door was barely cracked open. A soft hum floated from inside. She was singing. The next day, Jack walked Ellie to school. Her backpack was too big for her frame, always had been more books than friends in there. She adjusted the straps and kicked a pebble the whole way. At the front entrance, a figure waited, tall, composed hair, tied tight in a bun. A woman in her mid-30s wearing a dark green blouse and sensible flats. Jack recognized her from the faculty photos in the school hallway. Mr. Murrow, she asked, stepping forward. That's me. I'm Clara Sandoval. I teach music here. My mother mentioned she met you yesterday. Ellie stiffened beside him. Jack offered a polite smile. She spoke highly of you. Clara's expression didn't change. That's generous of her. The air between them chilled slightly. She asked me to pass along an invitation, Clara continued. There's a community showcase happening here next week. Students, local performers, retired artists. It's a tradition. My mother will perform a piece to close the event. Jack nodded. Sounds like a big deal. It is. She was hoping Ellie might sing something with her. Ellie's eyes widened in horror. No, Clara blinked. It's only an invitation. I don't do that, Ellie said quickly, already retreating behind Jack. Jack looked between the two. Maybe not this time. Clara gave a curt nod. Understood, but the invitation stands. As she turned to leave, Ellie whispered, She hates me. Jack looked down. She doesn't. She's just different from her mother. Then why did she pick me? He hesitated. Maybe she sees something she remembers. That afternoon, Maggie called. Would it be all right if I brought over a small keyboard, she asked. For Ellie, Jack asked, cautious. No. For me, she said. I haven't played in years. I figured your kitchen has the right kind of echo. He chuckled. It's got a lot of things. Echo might be the best. 20 minutes later, she arrived with a driver carrying a weathered keyboard and a footstool. Jack made coffee. Maggie played. At first it was tentative, a few dusty notes like someone stepping barefoot into a cold lake. But then it bloomed rich chords, minor key swells, ripples of memory in each phrase. Jack stood at the doorway, stunned. Ellie peeked from behind the wall. Maggie saw her. Without stopping, she began to hum along a simple tune, almost like a lullaby. Ellie listened. Then softly she began to sing. Just one note, but it was enough. Maggie smiled. Jack held his breath, and the air in the kitchen changed forever. By Wednesday morning, the whole school was buzzing. Flyers fluttered on every bulletin board, cafeteria wall, and classroom door. Bold letters proclaiming Millersville Community Showcase, featuring special guest Maggie Sandoval. One night only, Thursday, November 17th, surprise duet with a local student. Jack stood in line at the front office waiting to drop off Ellie's forgotten lunchbox. He didn't need to read the flyer again. He'd seen it taped to the side of the vending machine above the library return slot, even folded in half on the dashboard of his truck, courtesy of a well-meaning parent. And Ellie, she hadn't said a word all morning. Not during breakfast, not on the walk to school, not when she handed him the peanut butter jar without looking up. He couldn't blame her. As he handed the lunchbox to the secretary, the music room door creaked open across the hall. A familiar voice, calm but laced with tension, floated out. I didn't agree to a random student. That wasn't the plan, Clara. It was Maggie. Jack froze. I just thought it would be more organic, Clara replied. Letting the students vote. It's democratic. She's not ready. Then why encourage her? Pause. Because she reminds me of someone, Maggie said softly. And I'd rather give her a stage now before the world teaches her to hide. Jack stepped away from the desk, uncertain whether to walk or wait. But before he could move, the door opened, and both women saw him. Jack, Maggie said, the faintest flicker of guilt in her eyes. You heard some of it. Clara straightened. If you're worried no one's forcing your daughter, the student body will vote. There are over 30 submissions. Jack gave her a polite nod but turned to Maggie. She's scared. This kind of spotlight, it could undo her, not lift her. I understand, Maggie said. I do. Clara crossed her arms. Then why not let another child have the chance? Why does it have to be her? Jack noticed how Maggie flinched just slightly. He'd seen that kind of pain before. It wasn't ego. It was regret. That night, Ellie sat at the kitchen table silent as she picked at her macaroni. Jack leaned on the counter, unsure whether to push or stay quiet. Then, without looking up, Ellie asked, What happens if I say no to singing? She nodded. Nothing, Jack said. Absolutely nothing. Ellie glanced up. You won't be disappointed. Jack walked over, pulled out the chair across from her. Ellie said, voice soft, There's not a version of you I could ever be disappointed in, whether you sing to a stadium or to a ceiling fan in your bedroom. She looked at him a long moment, then whispered, They're letting the students vote. Some of the kids are saying I'm just getting picked because she likes me. He sighed. That's not fair. But it doesn't matter what they say. It matters what you want. I don't know what I want, Ellie confessed. That's okay, Jack said. Most people twice your age don't either. She let out a half laugh, then toyed with her fork. If I mess up in front of everyone, you won't be alone, he said. I'll be in the back row. I'll be the guy holding his breath and forgetting to blink. Ellie smiled barely, but it was there. 2 days later, the music room announced the results. Ellie Murrow had been selected. Jack saw it written on the hallway chalkboard when he arrived to fix a leaky sink in the nurse's office. The principal passed him and clapped him on the shoulder. Big news, huh? She's a quiet one, but maybe this will bring her out of her shell. Jack forced a smile. Maybe. In truth, his stomach was in knots. That evening, as he reheated leftovers, his phone buzzed. Maggie, I'd like to rehearse with her tomorrow. Privately, no pressure, only if she wants. Jack showed Ellie the message. She read it twice. Can we go? She asked. Just to try. He nodded. Of course. Maggie's house looked different in the late afternoon. Warm light spilled from every window. The porch had fresh mums and planters. The place felt alive again. Inside, the old baby grand piano had been wheeled into the sitting room. A velvet bench sat beside it, flanked by 2 music stands and a stack of handwritten sheets. Ellie hesitated on the threshold, backpack clenched to her side like a shield. You don't have to be perfect, Maggie said gently. Just present. Ellie looked to Jack. He smiled. You've got this. Maggie nodded toward the piano. Do you know Still Here? Ellie blinked. The one you wrote for your husband. Maggie tilted her head, surprised. You've heard it. My mom used to sing it when she was doing dishes. Jack's breath caught. He hadn't heard that name in years. The memory cut through the air like a cord. Maggie's eyes softened. Then let's begin with that. She played the intro slow and steady. Ellie stepped forward, voice shaking but clear. By the second verse, she wasn't singing to Maggie. She wasn't even singing to Jack. She was singing to her mother. Jack closed his eyes. For a moment, time bent. The kitchen, the soft humming. The way his wife used to dance with Ellie in her arms, the world shut out. When Ellie finished, there was silence. Maggie blinked quickly, dabbing her eye. Jack couldn't speak. And Ellie. She stood taller than he'd ever seen her. The day of the showcase arrived with skies the color of tin and a wind that whispered of winter's approach. Jack pressed Ellie's dress shirt with the kind of focus usually reserved for car engines. The kitchen smelled faintly of starch and toast, but neither of them touched breakfast. Ellie sat silently at the table, her knees pulled to her chest, fingers fidgeting with the hem of her sleeves. She'd chosen a simple navy blue dress, nothing fancy, but elegant in the way quiet things sometimes are. Jack folded the iron cord and turned to her. You okay? She nodded, eyes still fixed on the floor. Too late to fake the flu, she murmured. Jack knelt beside her chair. You want to back out? Ellie paused. No. But I want to disappear for the first 5 minutes. He chuckled. That's what courage feels like. If it were easy, it wouldn't be brave. She looked at him, then eyes wide and vulnerable. What if my voice breaks? Then it breaks, Jack said softly, and the world keeps spinning. But maybe someone in that crowd hears something they needed because it was real. Ellie's lip quivered. Then without a word, she leaned forward and hugged him tight. The Millersville Auditorium hadn't hosted a full house in years, but tonight every folding chair was filled. Parents with cameras, elderly couples clutching programs, students half curious, half bored. The old wooden floorboards groaned beneath the crowd's energy. Backstage, Ellie waited in the wings. The air was thick with nerves and stage dust. A dozen performers had come and gone, fiddle players, choirs, a surprisingly talented juggling act by the middle school principal. Each performance brought the moment closer. Jack stood near the back curtain watching her pace. Maggie arrived dressed in a black silk shawl and a silver brooch shaped like a treble clef. When she smiled, it calmed the air around her. You ready, Songbird? She asked. Ellie shook her head. Nope. Maggie laughed. That's the right answer. They moved to the side of the stage as the MC called her name. And now, a very special performance, one that bridges generations. Please welcome back to the stage, Miss Maggie Sandoval and our student soloist, Ellie Murrow. Applause, some polite, some excited. A few surprised murmurs rippled through the student section. Ellie stepped into the light. It was like walking into a different world, hot, silent, expectant. The crowd was a blurred ocean beyond the glare of the spotlight. She could feel the heat rise in her neck. Her throat tightened. Then Maggie sat at the piano, her fingers poised above the keys, and whispered the same words she had at their first rehearsal. "Just sing like she's listening." Ellie nodded. The intro began soft, melancholic chords that drifted across the hall like falling leaves. Ellie's hands trembled. She drew a breath, and nothing came out. A second passed, then two. A low murmur stirred in the crowd. Jack sat frozen near the back, gripping the arms of his seat. He didn't breathe. Then Ellie closed her eyes and sang. The first note was fragile, a glass thread across a canyon. But then came the next stronger, then the next. By the time she reached the second verse, the auditorium was still. Utterly, breathlessly still. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was raw silk, vulnerable, trembling, but with a strength underneath that pulled at the seams of every heart in the room. When she sang "Still Here in the Quiet Where Your Lullaby Lingers," Jack could hear his late wife in every word. He saw her swaying with a baby in her arms, humming through tears. By the final chorus, grown men wiped their eyes. Teachers stared in stunned silence. Clara Sandoval, standing near the side curtain, looked at her mother as if seeing her for the first time. Ellie held the last note until the piano fell silent. And then, nothing. For a breathless beat, the world paused. Then the crowd rose as one. Applause thundered across the room, not polite, but real, urgent, grateful, transformed. Some people stood. Others clapped with both hands pressed to their hearts. Maggie rose from the bench, bowed slightly, and stepped back. But Ellie stood still. Not frozen, not frightened. Just full. She looked out across the sea of people and saw one face, the only one that mattered. Jack's eyes, shining hand pressed over his mouth, completely undone. She smiled. He stood and applauded too. Backstage, the chaos swelled as performers hugged and high-fived. Ellie returned to the wings in a daze, still hearing echoes in her chest. Jack found her standing near the water cooler, clutching a cup with both hands. "You did it," he whispered. She looked up. "I didn't think I could." "You didn't just sing," he said, voice breaking. "You healed people." Maggie appeared beside them, resting a hand on Ellie's shoulder. "You reminded them what truth sounds like," she said. "Don't ever forget that." Clara approached then, her face unreadable. She looked at Ellie, then her mother. "That song," Clara said slowly. "I used to hum it in my sleep." Maggie blinked. "You remember I didn't. Not until tonight." There was a long silence. Then Clara turned to Ellie. "You were the right choice," she said. "Not because you were chosen, but because you belonged." Ellie flushed. Jack watched the three of them, his daughter, the woman he once idolized, and the daughter she'd spent years estranged from, standing together in a quiet, imperfect harmony. It was the most beautiful chord he'd ever heard. The showcase was over, but its echo clung to the town like morning mist. For the first time in years, strangers stopped Jack in the grocery store, not to ask for plumbing quotes, but to say, "Is that your daughter? The little girl who sang with Maggie?" Always followed by, "I still get goosebumps just thinking about it." Ellie took it all in with cautious grace. She never sought the attention, didn't revel in praise. If anything, she looked slightly embarrassed by it. But Jack could see something had shifted, a quiet flicker inside her, like someone had found the courage to turn on a lamp in a dark room. At home, she sang more. Not in hiding, not behind closed doors. She hummed while brushing her teeth. She sang to the dog across the alley that barked too much. She even caught Jack off guard one evening by harmonizing with the radio as he cooked chili. He didn't say anything at first, didn't want to spook it. But that night, while she was brushing her hair before bed, he leaned against her doorframe and said, "You know, when your mom used to sing, the house felt warmer. And lately, it feels like that again." Ellie turned to him, surprised. "Really, really?" She smiled, then looked down. "Do you think she would have been proud of me?" Jack's voice softened. "Baby, she already is." That Sunday, Maggie invited them to her house for dinner. It wasn't formal, just soup and fresh bread, but Jack suspected it was about more than food. The piano had been polished. Sheet music was spread across the coffee table, some pages scrawled with handwritten notes in faded ink. A record player hummed quietly in the corner, spinning an old Billie Holiday tune. Ellie wandered the living room like a museum, reading spine titles on Maggie's bookshelf. running her fingers over ivory keys. You kept it all, she whispered. I never stopped being a musician, Maggie said from the kitchen. Just stopped being a performer. Jack helped set the table. Hard to imagine walking away from all that. The lights, the applause. It's not as hard as you think, Maggie replied, pouring broth into mismatched bowls. Especially when your child needs something more important than a spotlight. Jack glanced toward Ellie. Clara Maggie nodded. She was born with a heart murmur. The kind that doesn't show until it's almost too late. I found out between tour stops, one pediatrician appointment turned into a full diagnosis overnight. I walked off a stage in Atlanta and never walked back. Ellie looked up. But why didn't you tell her? Maggie hesitated. Because I wanted her to grow up feeling strong, not sick. I thought if I could give her normal, she'd never feel broken. Jack understood that logic all too well. I think, Ellie said slowly, she just wanted the truth. Maggie sighed. Don't we all? Later that evening, Maggie pulled Jack aside while Ellie helped slice apples for dessert. She's gifted, Maggie said plainly. Not just talented gifted. Her ear, her phrasing, her instinct. I've met adults who've trained for decades and still don't have what she has. Jack shifted uncomfortably. She's 12. I'm not saying we shove her onto a stage, Maggie said. I'm saying we open a door, let her peek through if she wants. Jack looked toward the kitchen where Ellie was laughing, really laughing, with a paring knife in her hand and cinnamon on her nose. I just got her to believe in herself, he said. I'm not ready to risk breaking that. You won't, Maggie said. But the world's going to offer her windows. We owe it to her to show her how to open them. The next week brought an unexpected visitor. Clara arrived at Jack's doorstep on a Wednesday afternoon, her expression unreadable as ever. I'm not here to talk about my mother, she said before he could even say hello. I'm here for Ellie. Jack stepped aside. Clara walked in like she didn't want to be there, but couldn't stay away. She sat at the kitchen table, folded her hands, and waited until Ellie joined them. I watched the video again, she said. The one from the showcase. Ellie blinked. You filmed it? No. But someone did. It's been making the rounds. Ellie looked at Jack, panicked. Like, online, he nodded slowly. It's on YouTube. Local page. It's getting shared, Clara continued. I got an email yesterday from a friend who teaches at the Pacific Conservatory of Music in Oregon. They're holding a summer program limited to 8 middle school students nationwide. They want her to apply. Jack exhaled. Whoa. Ellie sat frozen. Clara handed her a brochure. It's not guaranteed. You'd need a recommendation, a video submission, and your father's permission. But they're interested. Silence. Ellie stared at the glossy cover, a picture of a concert hall beneath golden lettering. Her fingers curled around the edge of the page. I don't know if I'm good enough, she whispered. Clara tilted her head. That's not the question you should ask. Ellie looked up. The question is, do you want this, not for anyone else? Just for you. Ellie swallowed hard. Her eyes flicked to Jack. He didn't speak. He just nodded slowly. Whatever she chose, he'd follow. That night, Ellie sat on the front steps, brochure in her lap, hair tangled by the wind. Jack joined her, offering half a sandwich. I used to think dreams were things you chased, he said. But sometimes they're the things that find you. You just have to be brave enough not to run. Ellie looked at him. I'm scared, he smiled. Me too. She leaned her head on his shoulder. But maybe, she whispered, we don't have to be scared alone. For a girl who used to hide behind her backpack, Ellie had changed. Not loudly, not with declarations or sudden confidence, but in the quiet, steady way a frozen lake begins to melt under sunlight, almost invisible until the surface ripples. Each afternoon after school she practiced. Jack cleared a corner of the living room, moved the worn recliner to the garage, laid an old rug beneath the keyboard Maggie had gifted them. He pinned up a corkboard and wrote her rehearsal schedule in block letters. He even strung up a strand of white lights above the window, just because she said it made the music feel braver. The Pacific Conservatory wanted a submission by the end of the month. A video, no retakes. One take only, raw, honest, unpolished. Clara offered to help record. Jack was surprised when Maggie declined. She needs to feel this on her own, the older woman said, without the pressure of eyes that adore her. Jack didn't argue. Maggie was right. Still watching Ellie rehearse. Still Here, the same song that had once made her freeze on stage, Jack felt both wonder and worry. She wasn't the same girl anymore. She was becoming, and becoming was a scary, beautiful thing. Late one evening, after Ellie had gone to bed and Jack was rinsing dishes, Maggie stopped by. She brought tea and two battered vinyl sleeves under one arm. "I found something," she said, settling into the chair by the window. Jack poured hot water into mugs. "That a record?" Maggie smiled. "A memory." He slid the disc from the sleeve, her debut album. The cover featured her younger, in a red dress under stage lights. "You were just a kid here." 22, she said. "First real tour. I played bars in Nevada that barely had working plumbing." Jack chuckled. "You should have called me." She gave him a soft look. "I might be calling you now." There was something different in her eyes tonight, not just nostalgia, but a kind of unfinished longing. "You miss it?" he asked. Every breath she whispered. "But what I miss more is how I used to need it, like oxygen." Jack sat across from her. "And now I found a different kind of air," she said, looking toward the hallway where Ellie slept. They were quiet for a while, the record spinning in the background. Her voice, young, bright, untamed, filled the room. It was strange, Jack thought, how a song could reach through time and grab hold of your ribs. "I think I'm falling in love with your daughter," Maggie said suddenly, in the way a teacher loves their favorite student. "The kind that teaches you just as much as you teach them." Jack's breath caught. Then she added more quietly, "And I think I might be falling in love with you too." Jack didn't speak for a moment, not because he was stunned, but because he felt it too, and had for weeks. But the words had been too big, too sacred to say first. He reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "You're not alone in that." Meanwhile, Clara was unraveling. Not visibly, she still taught her classes with perfect posture and scheduled precision, but something inside her had cracked open. She couldn't stop watching Ellie's showcase video, couldn't stop hearing that song in the quiet corners of her apartment. She hadn't sung in years, not since her mother left the stage, not since the day she found the letter on her pillow. "I'm sorry, I love you, I have to go." The memory haunted her, reshaping itself now with the truth she had only recently learned, that Maggie left not to chase applause, but to stay by her bedside. One afternoon, Clara walked into the school auditorium when no one else was there. She stood center stage, looked up at the rafters and whispered, "You never even told me you were scared." The rafters didn't answer, but something in her chest shifted. On the day of the recording, the weather turned cold. Gray clouds hung low, and the windows fogged from the inside. Ellie wore her mother's old blue cardigan, the one Jack had kept in a sealed box for years. She didn't ask for it. She simply found it on her bed that morning, freshly washed. Jack had said nothing, just left it there. Clara set up the tripod and mic. She didn't hover, just gave Ellie a thumbs up, then stepped back. Maggie waited in the hallway. Jack sat on the couch, heart hammering. Ellie sat down at the keyboard, adjusted the stool, took a deep breath, and sang. Not Still Here this time. She'd changed her mind at the last minute, chosen something new, a song she wrote herself, about mothers and mistakes, about courage and silence, about singing even when your voice shakes. It was raw, imperfect, glorious. By the end, her fingers trembled on the final chord. Her voice cracked slightly on the last note. And Jack thought, this is what truth sounds like. When she finished, no one clapped. No one needed to. It was enough. That night, after Clara had submitted the file and Maggie had kissed Ellie's forehead goodbye, Jack tucked her into bed. "Did I do okay?" she asked sleepily. "You did more than okay," he said. "You told the truth." Ellie smiled. "Do you think they'll pick me?" Jack brushed her hair back from her forehead. "I think they already did." She frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said softly, "that music already chose you. That part, that's not up for debate." She closed her eyes. He stayed beside her until her breathing slowed and the night folded in around them. Outside, snow had begun to fall, the season turning quiet and sure. And inside that little house, music had found its way home. By the following week, the house felt like it had grown quieter, even though the music hadn't stopped. Ellie still sang each evening, still filled the living room with melodies as she waited to hear back from the conservatory. Jack still left sticky notes of encouragement on her keyboard. Sing with your heart, not your throat. Mistakes make music human, and her favorite, remember who you are singing to. But something had changed. A tension neither of them spoke aloud. It began when Maggie called late one evening. Jack had just finished cleaning the dishes when the phone rang. He answered quickly, not wanting to wake Ellie. Maggie's voice, though warm, had a sharpness he hadn't heard before. "She submitted the video, right?" she asked. Jack sat on the armrest of the couch. "Yes." Clara sent it in Monday. There was a pause. "And did she mention the gala showcase? The conservatory holds a spring gala in Portland every year? Only 2 of the accepted students get invited to perform. It's a very public stage. Major scouts attend." Jack frowned. "That wasn't part of the application." "No," Maggie said, "but they reached out to me. Personally. They saw the video. They want Ellie on that stage if she gets in." He ran a hand over his face. "She's 12, Maggie. She's exceptional. She's also a kid who still sleeps with the hall light on." Maggie's tone softened. "Jack, I know you're scared. I know what it means to give a child a spotlight. But she belongs in this world." Jack's voice cracked. "So did you. And you left it." There was silence. Then Maggie said quietly, "Yes, because I had to. But maybe, just maybe, I've learned how not to run this time." Jack stared at the blank TV screen. "I'll talk to Ellie." The next day, Clara showed up at Maggie's doorstep unannounced. She didn't ring the bell. Just stood there, coat buttoned to her throat, arms crossed the wind, tugging at her hair. Maggie opened the door and blinked in surprise. "Clara, I need to know the truth," Clara said. Maggie stepped aside. Inside, the house smelled like rosemary and lemon polish. The piano gleamed beneath the window. On the wall above it, the frame record of Maggie's debut single had been rehung. Clara's eyes landed on it instantly. "You put it back up?" Maggie nodded. "It never stopped being a part of me. I just hid it from myself." Clara took a breath. "I need you to tell me what happened that night. The night you left the tour. The night everything changed." Maggie motioned for her to sit. She didn't. So Maggie stood too. "It was after sound check," Maggie said softly. "You were at the hotel with your aunt. I got the call from the pediatrician. He said if we waited even another few weeks, you could." Her voice caught. "You could have collapsed. Your heart was unstable." Clara swallowed. "I tried to explain," Maggie said. "I wrote the letter, but the words felt useless. I wanted to be there, not explain why I had to be. You disappeared. I chose you." Clara looked away. "But I didn't know that." "I know," Maggie whispered, "and I've regretted it every day since." For a long time, Clara said nothing. The clock ticked behind them. Somewhere in the neighborhood, a dog barked. "I used to think," Clara said finally, "that you left because the stage mattered more than I did." Maggie shook her head, tears threatening. "But now I see," Clara continued, voice trembling, "that you left the stage because I mattered more." Maggie took one step forward, then another, and without another word, Clara fell into her arms. The hug wasn't clean. It wasn't pretty. It was the kind that started stiff, then broke into sobs neither of them had meant to cry. A reconciliation 20 years overdue. That evening, Jack found Ellie staring at the acceptance email on her tablet. Her face was unreadable. "You got in?" he said softly, approaching. Ellie nodded. "They said I was one of 8. His heart swelled. "Ellie, there's more," she said, holding out the screen. He read, "We are thrilled to invite you to perform as one of 2 featured soloists at our spring gala. This opportunity is optional, but highly encouraged." Jack sat on the couch beside her. "I don't know if I can do that," she whispered. "You don't have to. But what if this is like the moment?" Jack took her hand. "Then it'll still be there when you're ready." She blinked. "You're not mad, Ellie," he said. "I care about your voice, but I care about you more." She leaned into his shoulder and whispered, "Can Maggie go with me?" Jack hesitated. "You'd want that?" Ellie nodded. "She doesn't make it feel like pressure. She makes it feel like a story I'm part of." He smiled, kissed her hair. "Then yes, if you're ready, we'll all go." Later that night, Maggie and Clara arrived at Jack's house together. For the first time in years, they looked like family, not broken, but mended along the seams. Maggie pulled Jack aside as Ellie and Clara played with the dog in the backyard. "I'm not running anymore," she said simply. He studied her face. "And what if the music calls again?" She smiled. "Then I'll answer. But this time I won't answer alone." The snow began to fall the night before they left for Oregon. Not heavy, just soft, delicate flakes that fluttered like quiet applause from the sky. Jack stood on the porch with a mug of coffee in hand, watching Ellie twirl once in the driveway. In her socks, face turned upward, mouth open to catch snowflakes. Her laughter spilled out into the cold, like it belonged to a different time. Maggie stepped outside, wrapping her scarf tighter. She's different now. Jack didn't take his eyes off Ellie. She's still her, just louder in all the right ways. Maggie smiled. You think you're ready to share her with the world? He exhaled a plume of fog. I think I was never going to be ready. But that's not what being a father means, is it? No, Maggie said. It means loving someone enough to let them leave and still holding the door open. They stood in silence for a while. Then Maggie added softly, She asked me something yesterday. Jack turned. What she asked if I ever knew her mother. Jack blinked. What did you say? I said no, but I asked why. She said. Maggie paused, watching Ellie scoop a handful of snow and toss it at the air. She wishes her mom could see all this. That maybe you and I could tell her the story since she never got to tell it herself. Later that night, as the suitcase zippers zipped and travel snacks were packed into paper bags, Jack sat with Ellie on the edge of her bed, a faded photo album resting across their laps. She had long fingers, Ellie said, pointing at a picture of her mother at the piano. Like mine. Jack nodded. She used to say those fingers were made for reaching high notes. Ellie smiled. Was she nervous when she sang Terrified? Jack said, chuckling. But she said the moment her hands touched the keys, it felt like coming home. He turned a few pages, birthdays, baby steps, little Polaroids with corner creases. Then he reached the back. Tucked into a clear sleeve was a handwritten lyric sheet, yellowed, torn at the edges. She wrote this for you, he said. Ellie traced the faded ink with her fingertip. I don't know the melody. Jack took a deep breath. I do. He got up, pulled his guitar from the closet, tuned it quietly, then began to play. It was a simple tune, gentle, steady, like a lullaby dressed in grown-up words. Ellie listened, breath, held tears in her eyes. Then without prompting, she began to sing. Her mother's words, her father's chords, her voice. For a moment, she wasn't singing about someone. She was singing to her. And Jack sat there watching the girl he raised sing with the voice of the woman he lost, and knew in that moment that love never truly left. It just found new ways to echo. The drive to Portland took 12 hours. They stopped once at a gas station where Maggie bought a tiny snow globe of Mount Hood and handed it to Ellie with a wink. A keepsake for a weekend that changes things. At the hotel, Clara joined them with 2 garment bags, one for Ellie, one for Maggie. You'll look like magic, she said, carefully placing them on the bed. The morning of the gala was crisp and blue-skied. The concert hall stood like a cathedral of sound, its glass facade catching every ounce of light the sun had to give. Backstage nerves returned, the kind that tremble in your palms, tighten your ribs. Ellie sat quietly in the dressing room, the lyric sheet in her hands, the cardigan of her mother's across her lap. I don't know if I can do it, she whispered. Maggie knelt beside her. You've already done it, just by standing here. But what if I forget the words? Then hum, make something up, sing what you feel. Ellie looked up. That's not what they want. That's exactly what they want, Maggie said, brushing a strand of hair from Ellie's face. They want you, not the perfect version, the true one. Clara appeared in the doorway. They're ready. The house lights dimmed. The MC introduced Ellie in a low, reverent tone. A voice born in silence, a heart taught to sing by love. Please welcome Ellie Murrow. She stepped onto the stage alone. No Maggie at the piano this time. No Jack in the wings. Just her. A single spotlight found her as she adjusted the mic. The sheet music trembled in her hand, so she set it aside. She looked out into the auditorium, an ocean of faces blurred by light. And somewhere out there in the dark, she imagined her mother sitting in the very last row, just smiling. Then Ellie opened her mouth and began to sing the lullaby from the night before, the one Jack had strummed, into the stillness, the one her mother had written with no stage in sight. She sang it like a whisper, like a prayer, like someone who had nothing to prove, but everything to share. There was a moment halfway through where her voice cracked just slightly, and the audience leaned in. By the final note, the entire room was breathless. Not one person clapped at first, then someone stood, then another. And then the applause came, not wild, not thunderous, but long rising and filled with reverence. Jack wept in silence. Clara held her hand to her heart, and Maggie smiled like a woman who had finally come full circle. Backstage, Ellie ran into Jack's arms. "You did it," he whispered. She pulled back, eyes gleaming. "No, we did." Then she turned to Maggie. "Thank you," she said, "for hearing me." Maggie bent down, kissed her forehead. "Thank you," she whispered, "for reminding me why I ever sang at all." The night after the gala, Portland was still humming beneath the hotel windows. Streetlights blinked like old film reels, casting a golden haze over the wet pavement. Inside room 614, Ellie was fast asleep, curled up with her mother's cardigan, cheeks flushed from the performance fingers, still unconsciously tapping invisible keys in her dreams. Jack sat in the armchair by the window, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the skyline. His phone buzzed softly. "Maggie, can we talk?" He slipped on his shoes and met her in the lounge downstairs. She was already seated in a booth tucked into the corner, a mug of tea between her hands. Her eyes were tired, her posture elegant as ever, but there was something in her expression Jack hadn't seen before: hesitation. He slid into the seat across from her. "Everything all right?" Maggie looked up. "Yes. And no." Jack waited. She exhaled. "After the performance, someone from Polaris Records approached me." Jack blinked. "Polaris? As in Polaris?" "Polaris. They want me to come back. A retrospective album. Maybe a series of performances. Just me and a piano. Nothing flashy. Intimate. Real." She paused. "They saw Ellie on stage. They said she made them remember me." Jack absorbed that, nodding slowly. "I mean, of course they'd want that. You are a legend." Maggie smiled faintly. "I haven't heard that word in years," without flinching. "So, what are you going to do?" Her fingers traced the rim of her mug. "That's the question, isn't it?" Jack tilted his head. "Is it really?" Maggie looked up. "You already answered that question once," he said softly. "When Clara was sick, when no one was looking, and everything was on the line, you chose her. Not music, not fame. Her." "I know," Maggie said. "But I also remember how it felt to lose that part of myself. It wasn't just music. It was my language, my air. Giving it up, it saved Clara. Yes, but it cost me something too." Jack leaned back, folding his arms. "You think it's either or again?" She hesitated. "Isn't it always?" "No," he said firmly. "Not this time." Maggie watched him for a long moment. "You think I can have both?" I think Jack said that the girl upstairs just stood alone on the biggest stage of her life and didn't flinch. "I think you helped her find that strength. And maybe, just maybe, it's time she got to see you do the same." She was quiet for a long while. Then finally Maggie nodded. "I'm scared," she said. Jack smiled. "Good. Means you still care." The next morning, Clara knocked on Maggie's door just before breakfast. Her hair was slightly mussed, her eyes shadowed by a sleepless night. In her hand, she held a faded, folded envelope. "This was in my suitcase," she said. "I found it wedged in the lining. I hadn't used that bag since I was 12. Maggie took the envelope gently. Her own handwriting on the front to Clara. "Read when you're ready. I must have written it a dozen times," she said softly, "and still didn't have the courage to give it to you." Clara's voice was steady. "I think maybe I wasn't ready to understand it back then anyway." Maggie gestured toward the small table by the window. Clara nodded, and they sat, the air between them, thick but tender. "I've been thinking," Clara began, "about how I blamed you for everything I didn't become, the voice I didn't train, the life I didn't live. But watching Ellie, I realized it wasn't the stage I missed. It was you." Maggie's eyes welled. "I'm here now." Clara smiled. "I know." She reached across the table, squeezed her mother's hand. "And if you go back to the stage," she said, "go knowing that I'm not 10 anymore. I won't feel left behind. In fact, I'd like to be in the front row this time." That afternoon, Ellie and Jack wandered through a small Portland bookstore. She gravitated toward the music section while he browsed cookbooks he'd never actually use. She pulled out a collection of jazz standards and flipped through the pages. "Dad," she asked without looking up. "Yeah, why do people stop doing the thing they love?" Jack tucked the book under his arm. "Sometimes life asks them to. Sometimes the people they love need something else. And sometimes," he said, watching her closely, "they just get scared." "Were you ever scared?" He smiled. "Every day." Ellie looked up. Even now, especially now, he said, nudging her shoulder. But you make it worth it. She leaned against him. I hope I get to sing forever. He kissed the top of her head. You will. In one way or another, you will. That night before their flight home, Maggie called a family meeting in the hotel suite, shoes off, soup cartons open on the coffee table. I've decided something, she said, her voice calm but full. Everyone turned toward her. I'm going to say yes to the Polaris project. Clara nodded first. Good. Jack raised his glass of ginger ale. About time. But Maggie turned to Ellie. And I want you to sing with me. Ellie blinked. Me, a song your mother wrote, Maggie said. The one you sang at the gala. I want us to record it, just piano and vocals. For her. For us. Ellie's eyes filled. You think I'm ready? Maggie smiled. You already are. Ellie looked to her father, silently asking. Jack grinned. Let the world hear what I've heard since you were 5. They clinked glasses, tea, soda, and takeout cups alike, and sealed something unspoken. A promise. A beginning. Outside, the city twinkled with early winter lights. Inside, a family stitched together by song and silence moved forward. Together. Back in Millersville, winter arrived with a sharpness that nipped at every window pane and turned morning breath into mist. The little town still glowing from Ellie's performance, and the ripples it left moved more slowly now, like it was listening for something. And something was indeed stirring. For the first time in 2 decades, the marquee outside the Millersville Town Hall lit up again. One night only, Maggie Sandoval and special guests. Saturday at 7 p.m., it was Clara's idea. A homecoming concert. Not glitzy or grand. Just a simple show in the same hall where Ellie once stood, trembling behind a mic, and where Maggie had once given her last performance before vanishing into motherhood. Now they would return together. Jack stood near the back of the hall as volunteers rolled out chairs, checked lights, and tested sound. Ellie sat on stage legs, swinging from a stool, humming softly, as Maggie rehearsed the opening chords on a baby grand that had been donated just for the evening. She's steady now, Jack said to Clara, who stood beside him, arms crossed, eyes glued to the stage. Clara smiled a little surprised. It's like she belongs there. She does, he said, but not because she's perfect. Because she's honest, Clara nodded. I know that now. She hesitated. You ever think about leaving town again? For her, Jack shrugged. Used to. Back when I thought dreams only came true in places with skyscrapers. But I've seen enough now to believe they can happen right here between oil changes and Tuesday night dinners. Clara turned to him, her voice a little quieter. And for you, what does your dream look like now? He glanced at the stage where Maggie smiled at Ellie, gently guiding her through a tricky harmony, then looked back at Clara. It looks like this, he said. A life where the people I love are finally singing again. The concert hall filled quickly that night. Families bundled in coats and scarves. Neighbors brought folding chairs. Students came with notebooks hoping to catch inspiration. It wasn't a flashy crowd, but it was loyal, and they came with hearts wide open. Backstage, Maggie paced the narrow hallway, her heels clicking softly on the old linoleum. She wore black slacks and a sapphire blouse, understated but striking. Her silver hair pinned loosely, a single pendant at her collarbone. Ellie sat on a crate, nervously braiding and unbraiding her fingers. You okay? Maggie asked. I think so, Ellie whispered. Maggie bent to her level. Remember, this isn't about impressing anyone. Ellie nodded. It's about sharing. Maggie grinned. Exactly. At the sound of the opening announcement, they took their places. Jack sat in the 5th row next to Clara, hands folded tight in his lap. The lights dimmed. The crowd hushed. Then from the darkness, a single spotlight. Maggie stepped forward. For a beat, she said nothing. Just looked out across the audience like she was remembering every soul who had ever heard her voice. Then she spoke. I left this stage many years ago. I told myself it was the right choice, and it was. But I also told myself I'd never come back. That part, I was wrong about. A soft ripple of applause. I came back, she continued, because I heard someone sing who reminded me why I ever stood here in the first place. Her name is Ellie Murrow, and she doesn't need me to guide her. I just get the honor of standing beside her. Applause swelled. Maggie turned toward the shadows behind her. Ellie stepped into the light. There was a gasp somewhere near the front. Not because she looked older or different, but because she looked ready. Together they walked to the piano. Maggie sat. Ellie stood beside her, one hand resting lightly on the edge. The chords began. The song was Where You Left Your Light, an unreleased ballad Maggie had written decades ago and never performed. The lyrics were rewritten by Ellie, some verses replaced with words about loss, memory, and quiet hope. As they sang Maggie with her rich alto, Ellie with her crystalline soprano, the song rose like a tide. Not overwhelming, but inevitable. It filled the room with something sacred. Halfway through, Ellie reached for Maggie's hand. Not for support, but as a signal. She was ready for the solo verse. Maggie let go. The piano softened, and Ellie sang alone. Jack leaned forward, hands trembling. The verse was about her mother, about the night Jack first told her she had a voice, about standing on a stage that used to scare her and finding that it didn't anymore. Tears slid silently down Jack's cheeks. Maggie wiped one away herself, and Clara stood her hands over her heart, no longer the daughter of a star, but the witness to a new one rising. After the final note, the applause came like rain after drought, thunderous, uncontained. Maggie and Ellie bowed once, then twice, but Ellie didn't leave the stage. She stepped forward, cleared her throat, and took the mic. "There's someone I want to thank," she said, voice steady. Jack froze. "My dad," she said, "who never stopped listening even when I didn't make a sound, who told me it was okay to be scared, who taught me that music doesn't need an audience to be real." A pause. "I'm here because of him." The crowd turned toward Jack as Ellie held her hand out. "Come on," she said, smiling through tears. "We still owe Mom a song." Jack stood slowly, breath caught in his chest. Someone handed him a guitar. He walked up the aisle past clapping neighbors and tearful strangers onto the stage where his daughter waited. The lights warmed them both. Maggie began the first chord. Jack played along. And together, father-daughter in the echoes of a mother long gone, they sang. Not to impress, not to win, but to remember. The weeks that followed felt like something out of a dream, or maybe a season Jack had almost forgotten. One filled with light in unexpected places. The concert had changed more than Ellie's future. It had breathed warmth back into their little town. Kids at school who once whispered behind her back now asked for vocal tips. The librarian set up a local legends display featuring Maggie's records and Ellie's performance clips. Even Mr. Denton, the cranky man from the hardware store, now greeted Jack with, "Your girl made me cry like a fool. Don't tell anyone." But the greatest change didn't happen in public. It happened quietly. At home, in the way Ellie started waking up early just to sit at the keyboard before school. In the way Clara showed up every Thursday evening with new sheet music and a hot dish from the teacher's lounge. And in the way Maggie began smiling, not the polite kind for the press, but real ones. Wide, soft, earned. She had started humming around the house again. Jack noticed it the most on Saturday mornings. While he brewed coffee and Ellie spread jam on toast, Maggie would hum some half-forgotten jazz tune from her youth, tapping the beat against her tea mug. It was like watching color return to an old photograph. One quiet morning, Jack and Maggie sat together on the back steps, a gentle sun warming their shoulders, despite the winter still lurking at the edges. "You've changed," Jack said, watching her stir her tea. She tilted her head. "For the better, for the braver." She smiled. "And you?" He looked out toward the backyard where Ellie was hanging up her scarf to dry. "I think I've stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop." "Because it already did," Maggie asked gently. "Because I finally realized the shoe's not the point," he said. "It's what you build when you're barefoot." She chuckled at that, then grew quiet. "I'm thinking of staying," she said. Jack looked over, eyes searching hers. "Here," she nodded. "This town, it's slower, yes, but I breathe easier here. And Clara's here. Ellie's here. You're here." He reached over, resting a hand on hers. "You don't owe anyone a stage, Maggie, least of all yourself." "I'm not staying to hide," she said softly. "I'm staying to build something." By March, the town's music program was bursting at the seams. Enrollment tripled. A local cafe offered an open mic night every other Friday, and Ellie, always reluctant but smiling, performed at most of them. Sometimes solo, sometimes with Clara on keyboard, once with Jack on guitar when the scheduled act didn't show. They called themselves the Murrow House Band just for laughs. But no one laughed when they played. People listened. Ellie's voice had matured. Still soft, still airy, but now with edges of control and daring. Her presence glowed not showy, not performative, but magnetic. Jack often caught himself watching her from across the cafe, his heart full of wonder and disbelief. This was the girl who once hid behind backpacks, who used to cry before class presentations, now holding a mic like it was part of her hand. One night after an especially tender rendition of What a Wonderful World, Maggie took Jack aside. "She's going to outgrow us one day," she said, her voice filled with pride, but also the ache of inevitability. Jack nodded. "And we're going to let her." Spring arrived slowly in Millersville. Trees unfurled shy green buds. The air turned sweeter. Life, it seemed, was clearing its throat again. Ellie came home from school one day, cheeks flushed, holding a letter with a gold crest on the front. Jack opened it with shaking hands. Maggie, Clara, and Ellie stood behind him. "Dear Miss Murrow, it is with great pleasure that we invite you to join the full-time preparatory program at the Pacific Conservatory of Music this fall." Jack had to sit down. Clara covered her mouth. Maggie simply smiled misty-eyed as if she'd known all along. Ellie said nothing at first. Then quietly she whispered, "Does this mean I leave?" "Not right away," Jack said, recovering his voice. "But soon." They all looked at each other, family forged not by blood but by something stronger. Shared notes, honest words, second chances. "Are you ready?" Clara asked Ellie. "I don't know," she said, then added, "but I want to be." 2 weeks later, Maggie hosted a small celebration at her home, just the closest friends and neighbors. Ellie played piano while Clara sang. Jack grilled hot dogs out back. The house, once silent and solitary, overflowed with laughter and music. Near the end of the evening, Maggie called for quiet and raised a glass. "I once thought a voice was only meant for applause," she said, "but now I know a voice is meant for connection. It's meant for truth, for healing. And tonight we raise our glasses not just to Ellie, but to everyone who's ever doubted their own voice and still found a way to sing." The crowd clinked glasses. Jack looked across the room and found Clara watching Maggie with soft, adoring eyes, the kind a daughter saves for a mother who's finally come home. Later, as twilight settled and the guests trickled away, Jack stood with Maggie on the porch. "She's going to go, you know," he said. "I know," Maggie replied, "and we're going to let her." "We are." He paused, searching her face. "You sure you want to stay here?" Maggie stepped closer, laced her fingers through his. "I don't want to stay here," she said. "I want to stay with you. Wherever that is." He didn't answer with words. He just kissed her slow and steady as the stars blinked into the evening sky. Inside the house, Ellie sat at the keyboard, humming a new melody, one she hadn't yet written down, but already lived inside her. The summer before Ellie left for the conservatory passed like a quiet song, gentle unfolding in verses of daily life that meant more than they appeared. Mornings with dew on the grass, afternoons of soft melodies drifting through the house, evenings lit by fireflies, the air thick with the scent of cut wood and memory. No one spoke much about the upcoming departure, but everyone felt it. Jack took to waking early just to sip coffee on the porch, while Ellie played a few bars in the living room behind him. He told himself he was giving her space. In truth, he was collecting these sounds, storing them like postcards for the silence that would follow. Maggie was around more now, always around. She'd moved in slowly, not all at once. A scarf left on the armrest, her tea tins in the pantry. One day, Jack realized her name was now written on the mailbox beneath his, and it felt right. As for Clara, she had taken the music program at the school to new heights. But more than that, she had found her voice again, quite literally. She and Ellie began writing songs together. Ellie on melody, Clara on words. They laughed, argued about rhymes, lost track of time in the warmth of shared creation. One Sunday afternoon, they invited Jack and Maggie to hear a new song. It was called "Rooms You Left Warm," a song about those who pass through our lives and leave them softer, fuller, and change forever. They sang it in the living room. No microphones, no spotlight, just two voices, one guitar, one proud, tearful father, and a woman who had once thought she'd sung her last note. When they finished, Jack was silent. Then he whispered, "That's what home sounds like." The day Ellie was set to leave came wrapped in blue sky and gentle wind. She packed light, one suitcase, a carry-on, and a soft cloth case for her new keyboard, a gift from Maggie and Clara. She wore her mother's cardigan, now a little snug, but she refused to leave it behind. On her wrist was a simple bracelet, hand-strung bead spelling out hope, a gift from her dad when she was 7. Jack drove her to the station. Maggie and Clara followed in the second car carrying extra snacks, last-minute advice, and barely contained emotion. They didn't speak much on the drive. Sometimes words got in the way of what hearts already understood. At the platform, Ellie stepped out, her breath catching, when she saw the rows of stranger students her age, all boarding, all waving goodbye to people they loved. She looked smaller than usual in that moment. A little girl again. Jack put a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to be brave," he said softly. "Just be you. That's more than enough." Ellie turned to him, eyes shining. "How do I say goodbye?" He smiled, swallowing the lump in his throat. "You don't. You just say, 'I'll sing soon.'" Maggie stepped forward and handed Ellie a folded envelope. "Open it when you're homesick." Clara gave her a blank journal. "Write your own songs now. Don't wait for permission." Ellie hugged them all fiercely. When she turned to board, Jack said, "Wait." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something wrapped in tissue. She unwrapped it to find an old guitar pick smoothed down by time. On it, engraved faintly, were the words, "Still here." "Your mom used to carry this on tour," he said. "Now it's yours." Ellie clutched it to her chest and whispered, "Thank you for never letting go of me, even when I couldn't see myself." Jack's voice broke. "You are the best part of me." And with that, she turned and boarded the train. As it pulled away, Jack stood between Maggie and Clara, arms loosely wrapped around them both. He watched until the train vanished behind the trees, the sound of its departure blending with the wind. He didn't cry. Not this time. He just smiled, long and slow, like someone who had finally learned to trust the future. In the months that followed, letters came often. Sometimes long, sometimes just a single line: "Played our song for my roommate. She cried. Wrote a new bridge to Mom's lullaby. Feels like healing. Auditioned for the fall showcase. Didn't get in. Still proud. Miss your grilled cheese. Love you more than words." Each one was a melody of its own. Each one proof that music and love had found their way forward. One crisp November evening, the porch light clicked on. As Jack stepped outside, guitar in hand, Maggie beside him with a cup of tea. From the radio inside, a familiar song began to play. Ellie's voice, clear, confident, and beautiful. Jack closed his eyes and leaned into the music. "She's not just singing," Maggie said, resting her head on his shoulder. "She's soaring," Jack finished. He thought about the long nights, the silences, the gentle moments of connection, the risks they'd taken, the forgiveness they'd fought for, the unexpected twists that had brought them here. He thought about a stage, a spotlight, and a little girl who once believed her voice wasn't meant to be heard. And now, the whole world was listening. Some families are born, others are made note by note, kindness by kindness, love by love. We'd love to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching from? Tell us in the comments below. Your messages truly inspire us, and we read every single one. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional, uplifting stories just like this one. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you for watching and for being part of this journey. We'll see you in the next story.